Welcome back to Living Every Day with Passion and Purpose. 3 questions I'd like to review with you before we get started in this final program. Question number 1, what do you want? You want to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy. You want to be happy, I want to be happy, your friends want to be happy, your parents want to be happy, your children want to be happy, your employers want to be happy, your employees want to be, everyone wants to be happy. The truth is, we know the things that make us happy, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. We know the things that make us happy, we just don't do them. We simply have to begin to create a life that honors our legitimate needs, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Physically, eat the right sorts of food, exercise regularly, sleep regularly, you're happier. Emotionally, give focus and priority to your relationships. Give a little bit of carefree timelessness to the most important people in your life, you're happier. Intellectually, take 10 minutes a day to read a good book that expands your vision of yourself, that expands your vision of your world. What happens? You become more focused, more alert, more vibrant, more vital. You're healthier and you're happier and you have a richer, more abundant experience of life. Finally, spiritually, take a few moments each day to step into the classroom of silence, to get reconnected with yourself and reconnected with your God. What happens? A sense of peace, a sense of purpose, passion in that purpose. You're healthier, you're happier, and you have a richer, more abundant experience of life. What do you want? You want to be happy. We already know the things that make us happy. We simply have to start choosing happiness. 90% of our happiness and 90% of our misery comes from our own choices. Question number 2. What does God want? Most people never ask the question. Most people are scared to death to ask the question because most people think God always wants them to do the one thing they don't want to do. Most people never ask the question because most people think God always wants them to do the hardest thing. I mean, what sort of a God would that be? A God who wanted you to do the hardest thing just because it's the hardest thing. A God who always wanted you to do the one thing you don't want to do because it's the one thing you don't want to do. I don't know about you, but I don't believe in that sort of a God. What does God want? What is God's dream for you? God wants you to become the best version of yourself. Why? Because He knows it's the only way you'll ever be happy. Question number 3. What do we all need a little bit more of? Energy. And it's not like there's some energy guru out there. We're in control of the energy, 90% of it anyway. 90% of our happiness, 90% of our misery comes from our own choices. And in those choices, we choose to create energy or we choose to waste energy. What do you want? You want to be happy. What does God want? He wants you to become the best version of yourself. Why? Because it's the only thing that will ever make you happy. And when you look at it, I mean, the things that truly make you happy, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, they're also the things that cause you to become the best version of yourself. And they're also the things that bring more energy to your life. If we build a life with these things in mind, then we will move from merely surviving to thriving. And only then will we be ready for the most exciting journey there is in life, the journey from success to significance. Thank you. Good evening. The human heart is on a quest for happiness. You want to be happy, I want to be happy. And as I see it, God wants us to be happy. But sometimes in our journey, sometimes in our quest for happiness, we become mistaken about the things that truly bring us happiness. And in the last several days, we've had the opportunity to examine the different areas of our lives: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. We've been able to have a look at our lives, have a look at the choices we make, and have a look at which choices truly bring us happiness and which choices lead to misery, which choices lead to that quiet desperation that Thoreau so often described. I guess when it comes down to it, you have to ask yourself, how long do you want to be happy for? I mean, how long do you want to be happy for? Because, I mean, if you just want to be happy for a few moments here and there, probably sex, drugs, alcohol, gambling, probably do it for you. If you just want a few moments of happiness here and there. But between those moments of pleasure, which we so often mistake for true happiness, there's a great emptiness, a great darkness, a great hollowness that we experience in our lives. And I want more than that. I don't know about you, but that's not enough for me. These few moments of happiness here and there, I want more than that. And I don't want to experience that great darkness, that great misery, that quiet desperation in my life. I guess it depends how long you want to be happy for. I mean, if you just want a few moments of happiness, probably sex, drugs, alcohol, gambling, probably do it for you, you know? I mean, if you just want to be happy for an hour, take a nap. I mean, it works. You know, you take a nap, you sort of feel good. You know? If you want to be happy for a whole day, go shopping. You know? Get out the plastic and just go nuts. I'm not going to stand up here and try and convince you that that won't bring you some sort of happiness, because you and I both know that it feels good to buy things, to have things, but it doesn't last. And then the credit card bills come. I mean, if you just want to be happy for a weekend, go fishing or go golfing. If you just want to be happy for a month, take a vacation. You know, go down to Australia, have a great time, you know. Feed the kangaroos, get your photograph taken with the koala bears, you know. Go in the outback, wrestle with the crocodiles. If you want to be happy for a whole year, inherit a fortune. But if you want to be happy for a lifetime, find a way to make a difference in other people's lives. Because that's what the happy people have got. Every single time. When I look in my life, when I look at all the people I know, I ask myself, who are the people who are genuinely happy? I mean happy independent of substance and circumstance. Genuinely happy. I'm talking about a genuine happiness, independent of substance or circumstance. It's easy to be fat and happy by the pool in February when there's 6 inches of snow at home. But it's circumstantial happiness. The people I know in my life who are happy, genuinely happy, independent of substance and circumstance, they're the people who are making a difference in other people's lives. There are people who have a sense of mission in their lives. They have a sense of who they are, point A, strengths and weaknesses, faults, failings, flaws, defects, talents, abilities, potential. They have a sense of who they are. They have a sense of who they're capable of becoming. And they're striving to become the best version of themselves. They know what their talents are. They know what their gifts are. They know what their abilities are. They know what their genius is. They know what they have to offer, and they're offering it to humanity. They're making a difference in other people's lives. They're making a difference in other people's lives, and that's where the happiness comes from. That's where the happiness comes. The greatest power you have is your ability to make a difference in other people's lives. The greatest power you have is your ability to make a difference in other people's lives. The greatest power I have, the greatest gift any of us has, the greatest ability any of us has, is the ability to make a difference in other people's lives. And yet, it is the most unemployed human ability. The most unemployed, our greatest talent, our greatest power, and yet, the most unemployed human ability. Why? Because we get so consumed with ourselves, get so self-centered, self-interested, self-absorbed, self-consumed, that we forget this whole world that surrounds us. We forget this whole world that surrounds us and all the people. And it's not that hard, you know? You're having a tough day, you're having a rough day, you're not in a particularly good mood, you're walking down the street and somebody smiles at you. I mean, really smiles at you. Looks you in the eye, gives you a great smile. What happens? It can change your whole mood, yes or yes? Just that one smile. It's the power to change your whole mood for the whole day. Our ability to make other people's day is uncanny. It doesn't take that much, a smile or an unexpected letter. You know, you go to the mailbox, you pick up the mail, you know, and in between all of the shopping catalogs and all of the credit card pre-approved applications and all of the junk, you find a letter that actually has handwriting on it. Think to yourself, that's strange. You open it up, it's a letter from someone you haven't spoken to in 6 months. It's a letter from someone you haven't seen in 3 years maybe. And what does it do? Makes your day, yes or yes? It doesn't take that much, you know? An unexpected letter, you know, a box of chocolates, a bunch of flowers, a batch of cookies. It doesn't take that much to make people's day. You and I, we have the power to be the difference
that makes the difference. We have the power to be the difference that makes the difference. And yet it is the most unemployed of all human abilities. Why? Because we get discouraged. We fall into the trap of believing the lies that the world feeds us. The world wants to tell us that the world is being controlled by just a very small handful of people, and they're all in control, and they're just playing with us like puppets. The grey people, the big people, the powerful people. And it's not true. You and I, we direct the whole course of human history. It is the common man, the little people, that have the ability to be the difference that makes the difference in 1,000 different ways every day. But we believe the lie that we don't have that power. We believe the lie that we don't have that power.
There are 3 myths when it comes to the pursuit of happiness. The first myth is that worldly success will make us happy. What level of success do you imagine would make you happy? Because I can promise you, the happiness that will be born from that success will be very short-lived. I've known some people who have been phenomenally successful. Some of them immensely happy, and some of them are miserable. And what I've discovered is the ones that were very happy before they became successful are still very happy. And those that were miserable before they became successful are still miserable. The truth is, worldly success only makes us happy, only brings happiness to our lives, in as much as it helps us become the best version of ourselves. The second myth is that physical pleasure will make us happy. But what physical pleasure can be sustained? Physical pleasure is fleeting, and when detached from our essential purpose, always leaves emptiness in its aftermath. Physical pleasure contributes to the lasting happiness in our lives only when it helps us to become the best version of ourselves, only when it is connected to our essential purpose. The third myth is that fun equals happiness. Most people believe the more fun experiences they can pack into their lives, the happier they will be. I mean, close your eyes for a moment and imagine a scene of happy people. Most people will conjure up a scene of people eating, drinking, partying. This is their scene of fun people. Very few people will conjure up an old woman sitting on a swing, a porch swing, reading a great book, or an old man or a young man working in his garden, equally quietly, equally contented, or a couple playing with their children. Most people conjure up a scene of happiness. They conjure up people partying, drinking, eating. The challenge is to learn to have fun doing the things that matter most. I mean, the more we can infuse the things that help us become the best version of ourselves with fun, the happier we'll be. And that's the only connection between fun and happiness. We only find happiness through the activities of fun when those activities are also helping us achieve our essential purpose and become the best version of ourselves.
Once upon a time, there was a young boy. He lived just by the beach, and every afternoon after school, he used to walk along the beach. And one day, as he was walking along the beach, he noticed that as the tide had gone out, it had left many starfish stranded on the beach. And the boy knew that without the water and the oxygen from the water, the starfish would die before the tide returned. So as he walked along the beach that day, one by one, he picked up the starfish and he threw them back into the ocean. He couldn't pick them all up. There were too many of them. But the ones that he could, one by one, he picked them up and he threw them back into the ocean. And as he came towards the other end of the beach, an old man came walking in the other direction. And the old man saw what the young boy was doing. And he cried out to the boy, "What are you doing, boy? You're wasting your time. You're never going to make a difference. There's just too many of them." The boy ignored the old man and continued one by one to pick up the starfish and to throw them back into the ocean. But as the old man came closer to the boy, he came right up to the boy and he stood in the boy's face and he said, "What are you doing, boy? You're wasting your time. There's too many of them. You're never going to make a difference. Forget about them. Just enjoy your walk." The young boy ignored the old man and just stood there looking down at the sand. And with that, the old man grabbed the boy and he turned him around and he made him face down from where he had come. And as the old man and the young boy looked down the beach, they could see that there were hundreds of starfish, thousands of starfish that the boy had missed. The old man said to the young boy, "Look, boy, there's hundreds of them. There's thousands of them. You're never going to make a difference. Forget about them. Just enjoy your walk." And with that, the young boy, he bent down into the sand one more time and he picked up one more starfish. And then he stood up and he threw that starfish as far as he could out into the ocean. He looked deep into the eyes of the old man and he said, "I made a difference for that one, didn't I?" You see, you and I, we can't change the world. Not single-handedly. You and I can't change the world single-handedly. But we can make a difference. We have a powerful ability to make a difference. But we too often let it go unemployed. Once upon a time, there was an old man. He was taking a bus ride, and in his arms, he had a beautiful big bunch of long-stem red roses. Rich, moist, gloriously wrapped in baby's breath and a wonderful arrangement of ribbons. And he nursed the roses as the bus drove along. Just across the aisle from the old man, there was a young woman, maybe 18 years old. And she looked over at the old man nursing these flowers, and she thought to herself, "I hope someday some man loves me enough to bring me flowers like that." And the bus drove along. And every 3 or 4 minutes, this young woman would look over at these flowers again and have the same thought. "I hope someday some man loves me enough to bring me flowers like that." And the bus drove along. And after about 25 minutes, they came to a stop, and well, as it turned out, that was the old man's stop. And he got up to get off the bus, but as he did, he had noticed the young woman looking at the flowers. So he stepped over to where she was sitting. He said to the young woman, "I bought these flowers for my wife, but I have a feeling that she would want you to have them." And with that, the old man handed the young woman the roses. She began to cry. The old man went ahead and he got off the bus, and as the bus drove away, the young woman watched the old man walking into the cemetery to visit his wife. A box of chocolates, a bunch of flowers, an unexpected letter. You and I, we have the power. We have the power to make a difference. We just let that power go unemployed. We just let that power go unemployed. Did you ever see a movie called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Did anyone ever not see Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Just a show of hands. Just one back there. Obviously had a deprived childhood. There's no point trying to hide, you know, once you've put your hand up, you know. Not to mention the fact you've got a bright pink shirt on. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So, Charlie wins the golden ticket. Charlie, how many people won the golden ticket? Anyone tell me? 5 people, yes. 5 children win the golden ticket. 5 children win the golden ticket, including Charlie. And because he wins the golden ticket, he gets to take the tour of the factory, and he gets a lifetime supply of chocolate, and he gets to take one person with him. So he decides to take his Grandpa Joe. His Grandpa Joe, he decides to take. So you got Charlie, and you got Grandpa Joe, and then you got the 4 other brats, and their parents, mothers, fathers, whatever, and they're taking the tour of the factory, and one by one we're getting rid of the brats, and then all of a sudden we've just got Charlie left. And Charlie and Grandpa Joe and Mr. Wonka, you remember, we've just come out of the Wonka Vision room. Do you remember the Wonka Vision room? Everything was in white. Everything was in white, and we shrank Mike TV down to about this big. We put him in his mother's purse, and we sent him off with who? Can anyone tell me? The Oompa Loompas, exactly. We sent him off with the Oompa Loompas to do whatever Oompa Loompas do to someone who's been shrunk this big from the Wonka vision. So we're left, we've just got Grandpa Joe, we've got Charlie, we've got Mr. Wonka, and all of a sudden, Mr. Wonka's mood changes. All of a sudden, Mr. Wonka's mood changes. He's busy, he's got to go, he's got phone calls to make and letters to write. And he says, I hope you enjoyed the tour. The door's there, show yourself out. And he disappears in behind his office door. And Grandpa Joe's standing there, and Charlie's standing there, and Charlie looks up at Grandpa Joe and he says, what happened? Grandpa Joe says, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And he goes marching into the office. He opens the door, and remember, in the office, everything's in halves. Half a desk, and half a chair, and half a picture, and half a mirror, and half a filing cabinet. And he walks up behind Mr. Wonka, who's sitting at half a desk on half a chair, writing half a letter with half a pen. And he says, Mr. Wonka, what about the chocolate? Mr. Wonka doesn't say anything. He just keeps writing his letter. Grandpa Joe continues, you know, the lifetime supply of chocolate, because Charlie, he won the golden ticket, and we had the tour of the factory, and we enjoyed the tour of the factory, but when does he get the chocolate? Mr. Wonka gets really angry. He says, there is no chocolate. You stole fizzy lifting drinks from the fizzy lifting drink room, and you floated up in the ceiling, and now the ceiling has to be sterilized, and you broke the rules. There is no chocolate. And Grandpa Joe says, I didn't see any rules. Mr. Wonka gets up out of his chair and he walks over to the filing cabinet, half a filing cabinet, takes out half a copy of the contract that the kids had signed at the beginning of the tour and begins to read it with half a magnifying glass. And Grandpa Joe looks at him in disbelief. He says, you're a crook, you're a thief, you're a swindler. How could you crush a little boy's dreams like this? And Grandpa Joe turns around to leave, but as he does, he realizes that Charlie has walked into the room and has witnessed this scene. And the look on his face, you can just tell that he's crushed. Absolutely crushed. You remember earlier in the movie, Mr. Slugworth, who was Mr. Wonka's arch competitor, had offered Charlie more money than he could earn in 10 lifetimes if Charlie would bring him one what? Everlasting gobstopper. Very good. One everlasting gobstopper. And what had Mr. Wonka given Charlie during the tour? One everlasting gobstopper. One everlasting gobstopper. So Grandpa Joe, he walks over, he takes Charlie by the arm and he says, if Slugworth wants an everlasting gobstopper, that's just what we'll give him. And with that, Charlie stops walking and he takes Grandpa Joe's hand off his arm, and he turns around and he walks back into the office. He walks up behind Mr. Wonka, who once again now is sitting at half a desk on half a chair, writing half a letter with half a pen. And he takes the everlasting gobstopper from his pocket and he says, Mr. Wonka? And he places the everlasting gobstopper on the edge of the desk. Wonka. He doesn't look up, he doesn't turn around, he doesn't move, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't even look at the everlasting gobstopper. He doesn't have to. He just reaches out his arm across the desk, he grasps the everlasting gobstopper, and he whispers, and so shines a good deed in a weary world. And that's all it needs. That's all it needs. And you have the power, and I have the power. And we know we have the power, and we know when the opportunity emerges for us to engage that power. But we too often let that opportunity pass us by. We too often let that opportunity to be the difference that makes the difference pass us by.
Charlie knew what the right thing to do was, and he did it. Truth be told, in 99.9% of situations, you and I, we know what the right thing to do is. We just don't always do it. When we do it, there's a warmth, there's a glow, there's a happiness that comes from doing the things that we know are good, true, right, noble, and help us become the best version of ourselves. When we don't do the things that we know are the right things to do, when we don't do the things that we know will help us become the best version of ourselves, there's a sense of disappointment, there's an emptiness created by that sense of disappointment. It's a disappointment in ourselves because somewhere deep inside, we want to reach out and grasp the best version of ourselves. Somewhere in deep inside, we want to be all we can be.
There are two types of people in the world. There are two types of people in the world. And there are two seas in Palestine. One is fresh, and fish are in it. Splashes of green adorn its banks. Trees spread their branches over it and stretch out their thirsty roots to sip its healing waters. Along its shores the children played, as children played when he was there. He loved it. He could look across its silver surface when he spoke his parables, and on rolling plain not far away, he fed 5,000 people. The river Jordan makes this sea with sparkling water from the hills. So it laughs in the sunshine, and men build their houses near to it, and birds their nests. And every kind of life is happier because it is there. The river Jordan flows on south into another sea. Here, there is no splash of fish, no fluttering leaf, no song of birds, no children's laughter. Travelers choose another route and less on urgent business. The air hangs heavy above its waters, and neither man nor beast nor fowl will drink from it. What makes the mighty difference between these two seas? What makes the mighty difference? Not the river Jordan. No, the river Jordan empties the same good water into both of them. Not the soil in which they lie, and not the country that surrounds them. The difference is this: the Sea of Galilee receives, but does not keep the Jordan. The Sea of Galilee receives, but does not keep the Jordan. For every drop that flows in, another drop flows out. The giving and the receiving go on in equal measure. The other sea is shrewder. Hoarding its income jealously, it will not be tempted into any generous impulse. Every drop it gets, it keeps. The Sea of Galilee gives and lives. The other sea gives nothing, and it is named the dead. There are two kinds of people in the world. There are two kinds of people in the world. And there are two seas in Palestine. What kind of person will you be remembered as? Greatest ability we have, the ability to make a difference in other people's lives. The greatest ability we have is our ability to make a difference in other people's lives. You've got to make it a habit. Got to make it a habit. Our lives change when our habits change. I don't know what you do when you're showering each morning, but it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity while you're showering each morning to ask yourself, whose day can I make today? Whose day can I make today? Our lives change not through monumental big changes. Our lives change through the implantation of new habits, tiny habits like mustard seeds that grow to take strong root in our lives. Tiny habits planted in our lives. You do that, just that one thing. You spend your time showering each morning asking yourself, whose day can I make today? Your whole life will change. Your whole life will change. You know it, I know it, and God knows it. The question is, when will we begin to plant these habits into our lives? When will we begin to plant these habits into our lives? Our lives change when our habits change. It's not freak luck. It's not chance. We've been talking about it throughout the series. Our lives change when our habits change. 10 minutes a day. Do you have that note on your bathroom mirror? Do you have that note on your bathroom mirror? Throughout these days, have you been doing your 10 minutes a day? Taking Sundays off. Are you going to take that seriously? Are you going to rediscover the rhythm of life? Because 6 weeks from now, the people who take the new habits seriously, their lives will be different. 6 weeks from now, the people who take the habits seriously, their lives will be different. And people will notice it around them. People wonder, how did that happen? Maybe it was freak luck. Maybe it was chance. Wrong. Maybe they're God's favorites. God doesn't have favorites. The same grace is being poured forth on Michael Jordan and Francis of Assisi and Adolf Hitler. The difference? Receptivity. Receptivity. Do we open ourselves up to what God has in store for us? Do we open ourselves up to God's grace in our lives? Do we open ourselves up to God's dream, God's vision for you, for me? Our lives change when our habits change. What does it take? It takes perseverance. It takes perseverance. Because most of us, we want our lives to change. We want our lives to change desperately. Not completely, but some aspects, some areas of our lives, we want them to change. They don't change because we live in the miscredited fantasy that one day we will wake up and just all of a sudden, magically, everything will be different. And it never happens. And it never will. Why? Because our lives change when our habits change. I remember a couple of years ago, I was back in Australia, right at the beginning of Lent. And it was Ash Wednesday evening and the phone rang. I was walking by just as it rang, and so I picked it up, and a little voice on the other end of the phone said, "Is that you, Uncle Matt?" I said, "Yeah, this is me." It was my niece, Zoe. She said, "Hi, Uncle Matt, it's Zoe." I said, "Hi, Zoe, how are you?" She said, "I'm good, Uncle Matt." I said, "Zoe, how did you know it was me? You know, I got 7 brothers." I say, "Zoe, how did you know it was me?" She says, "Oh, Uncle Matt, you sound like an American." I say, "Thank you, Zoe." I asked her, "How was your day, Zoe?" She said, "Oh, Uncle Matt, I had a busy day. I went to school, and then I came home and I did some homework, and then I went to volleyball practice, and then I came home, I did some more homework, we had some dinner, then I went to church, and I got ashes." "What do you mean you got ashes?" "Yeah, Uncle Matt, you know, Father, he made a big mess on my head with those ashes this year." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, what did Father talk about?" "What do you mean, Uncle Matt?" "You know, before communion, you know, Father normally talks a bit." "Oh, yeah, Uncle Matt, I remember. He talked about giving up stuff for Lent." "Guess what I'm going to give up, Uncle Matt?" "No idea, Zoe. What are you going to give up?" "Coca-Cola." I said, "Zoe, you really like Coca-Cola." She says, "Yeah, I know, Uncle Matt, but Father, he was talking about giving up something that's really difficult. So for me, Coca-Cola." I said, "Well, that's great, Zoe." Ash Wednesday evening. 2 days later, Friday evening, I'm out at the basketball. I'm out at the basketball with my 2 nieces, Emma and Zoe. Emma's the elder. She's playing in the basketball game. Zoe's the younger, and she's sitting next to me with 5 or 6 of her little giggling friends from school. So I look across halfway through the second half, and Zoe is guzzling down a large bottle of Coca-Cola. She is guzzling down a large bottle of Coke. I don't say anything. I just sort of smile to myself, turn back to the game. About 5 minutes later, there's a tug on my shoulder. Uncle Matt, I forgot." I look at her, I say, "You forgot what, Zoe?" "Oh, Uncle Matt, I forgot. I gave up Coca-Cola for Lent, and I just drank a bottle of Coca-Cola." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her and smiled. She said, "It's all over now. I have to wait till next year." And that is why our lives don't change. Because it takes perseverance.
It's interesting, isn't it, that most people judge other people by their successes and then turn around and judge themselves by their failures. I mean, look at a guy like Babe Ruth. You know, he struck out 1,330 times during his career. He hit 714 home runs. He failed twice as often as he succeeded. Do we judge him by his failures? Absolutely not. He failed twice as many times as he succeeded. Do we judge him by his failures? No, we judge him by his successes. 714 home runs. In the early 1900s, there was a young cartoon journalist. Came out of school and captured his dream job, you know, working at a newspaper, drawing cartoons. Became very close to his boss, became a close friend and mentor. Until one day his boss came into his office and fired him. The young cartoon journalist, he was devastated. You know, this was his dream job. This had been his whole dream, his whole life. And all of a sudden, a man who he deeply respected had fired him from this dream job. And he said to his boss, "Do you mind if I ask why?" His boss said, "Well, the way I see it is you're in a creative position, and I don't think you're a creative person. You're in this creative role, and to me, you don't strike me as a very creative person. I think you should move into something else." The young man went home. He was absolutely devastated. He went into a fit of depression for about 3 months. But about 3 years later, that young man created something we know as Mickey Mouse. His name was Walt Disney. Here's another example, perseverance. I mean, Vincent van Gogh, he painted 1,700 paintings during his lifetime. Imagine, 1,700 paintings. How many paintings do you think Vincent van Gogh sold while he was alive? One. Only one painting while he was alive for $85. Imagine if Vincent had said to himself, "Yeah, Vincent, why don't you become a painter, and why don't you paint 5 paintings and sell those 5, and when you've sold those 5, then you can paint some more." You'd never be able to go down to Philadelphia and see such great works as sunflowers. 1,700 paintings during his lifetime, only sold one. But 100 years to the day after his death, one of Vincent's paintings was sold at auction in New York City for $40 million. Perseverance. Find your genius, bring focus to your genius, and chase down those dreams.
My favorite story of perseverance in American history is the story of Abraham Lincoln. Many people believe that Lincoln was just born ready to become president. Not so. He was born into great poverty. He lost 8 elections, twice failed in business, suffered a nervous breakdown, all before he became president of the United States. This is a brief sketch of his life. In 1816, Lincoln's family was forced out of their home and he had to go to work to support them. In 1818, his mother died. In 1831, he failed in business. In 1832, he ran for state legislator and lost. In 1832, he also lost his job. In 1832, he also decided he wanted to go to law school, but his application was rejected. In 1833, Lincoln borrowed some money from a friend to begin a business, but by the end of that same year, the business had failed and he was bankrupt. Lincoln spent the next 17 years of his life paying off that debt. In 1834, he ran for state legislator again and lost. In 1835, he was engaged to be married. But his fiancée died. That broke his heart. In 1836, Abraham Lincoln suffered a total nervous breakdown and spent more than 6 months completely confined to his bed. In 1838, he sought to become Speaker of the state legislature and lost. In 1840, he sought to become elector and lost. In 1843, he ran for Congress and lost. In 1846, he ran for Congress again. This time he won, made his way to Washington. But in 1848, Lincoln ran for re-election to Congress and lost. In 1949, he sought the job of land officer. Listen to that. Abraham Lincoln applied for the job of land officer of his home state. His application was rejected. In 1954, he ran for the US Senate again and lost. In 1956, he sought the vice presidential nomination at his party's national convention. He got less than 100 votes and lost. In 1958, he ran for the US Senate again and lost. And then in 1860, Abraham Lincoln decided to run for president. I mean, based on what? He probably thought to himself, in 1858, when he ran for the Senate and lost, he probably said to himself, it's all right, I'm going to be president in 2 years. He won. He won. Went on to become a great president. This is what he said. He said, "The path was worn and slippery. My foot slipped from under me, knocking the other foot out of the way. But I recovered, and I said to myself, it's a slip, not a fall. It's a slip, not a fall." Perseverance. Perseverance. Take the people you most admire out of the history books and see the role perseverance plays in their lives. See the role perseverance plays in their lives. Abraham Lincoln, great story. I saw Michael Jordan interviewed a few years ago. The interviewer asked him, Michael, what is the secret to your success? As if anyone could pinpoint one thing and say. But Jordan took the question seriously, and he looked down for a moment and collected his thoughts. Then he looked back up at the interviewer and he said this: I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost more than 300 games. And 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. Throughout my life and throughout my career, I have failed and failed and failed again. And that's why I succeed. And that's why I succeed. Perseverance. There is no success without it. There is no success without it. Perseverance. What is the difference between the heroes, the leaders, the legends, the champions, the saints that fill the history books and the rest of us? They just have better habits. They just have better habits. And one of them, always dominant in their lives, perseverance. So often the challenges before us, they seem impossible. So often the challenges before us seem impossible. I remember as a child, when I was in first grade of primary school, I was 7 years old, and it was a great year in my life because it was during that year that I came to learn that the impossible can be achieved, that anything can be achieved, just about anything, little by little. I remember in grade 1 of primary school, coming to the school gate on a Friday afternoon and finding my brothers standing around the gate, messing around, playing games, beating each other up a bit, waiting for my mother to come and pick us up from school. And I remember on Friday afternoons, all my brothers used to be happy and excited because the school week was over, the weekend had come, and that meant lots of sports and no homework. And so there was a great excitement there. But I remember week after week on a Friday afternoon making my way to the school gate, very sad. And I remember one Friday afternoon in particular, the school bell went and everyone rushed out of class. I slowly tidied my desk, I packed my school bag. Then I dragged my school bag slowly towards the school gate, where I found 4 of my brothers happy and excited because once again the weekend had come around. But I remember this particular Friday afternoon I was particularly sad. And I remember my mother coming to get us. She used to park the car down the street and then walk up to the gate and gather us all together and then walk us down to the car and throw the bags in the back of the car, and one by one we'd get into the car. And I remember getting into the car that day and bursting into tears. My brothers, they looked at me wondering what had happened. And then my mother got into the car and she saw me crying. And she said, "What's wrong?" You see, in grade 1 of primary school, on Friday afternoons, we used to have our spelling test, and I always used to fail. They used to make me sad. But I remember my mother taking me home and holding me in her arms and saying, "Everything's going to be all right. We're going to practice your spelling and you'll get better." And then she said to me, "How many did you get in your spelling test today?" And I said, 6 out of 20. Yeah, the kids used to laugh like that. That's why I was sad. She said to me, "How many did you get in your spelling test today?" I said 6 out of 20. She said, "That's okay. If you get 7 next week, on Friday afternoon, I will take you straight from school and I'll buy you a big bar of chocolate." I got 7. And I got my bar of chocolate. The next week I got 8 and more chocolate. The week after that, 9 and more chocolate. Then 10 and 12 and more chocolate, and 14 and 16 and more chocolate, and 18 and 19 and 20 and more chocolate, until I had developed a love for chocolate. But I could spell. And I think we all experience things like this in our lives. For me, to get 20 out of 20 in spelling, when I was in first grade, when I was 7 years old, seemed like an impossible task. It seemed like, climbing Mount Everest twice in 2 weeks backwards. But little by little, through the encouragement of my mother, my teachers, I was able to climb that mountain. Little by little, through their encouragement, I was able to climb that mountain. It takes perseverance.
Everything can be achieved little by little. A couple of summers ago, 3 or 4 of my friends cornered me and accused me of living in the comfort zone. They told me that I'd stopped dreaming, that I was only doing the things I knew I could do and that I knew I could achieve, and that I wasn't pushing myself, that I wasn't stretching myself enough. As a solution to this, they decided that I needed a bit of a challenge in my life, and they had already decided what that challenge would be. They invited me to join them in Colorado to climb a mountain, 14,500 foot mountain. As we began walking that morning, I discovered that they had already climbed a 10,000 foot, an 11,000 foot, a 12,000 foot, and a 13,000 foot mountain, and they were seeking their 14,000 foot victory. I, on the other hand, had never climbed anything in my entire life. When we get to about 11,000 feet, you get through the tree line, and the air becomes a little bit tight. You get to about 12,000 feet, and you take 10 steps, and you need to stop to take another breath. I get to about 13,000 feet. By this time, we've lost 3 of them. It's just me and one other guy climbing this mountain. We get to about 13,000 feet, and I'm there, and I'm thinking, what am I doing this for? I'm thinking, what do I want to be up here on this mountain for? I'm thinking, I've done 13,000 feet. I mean, they've done 10,000 foot mountain. If I was doing a 10,000 foot mountain, it would have been done 3 hours ago. They've done 11,000 foot mountain, a 12,000. What do I need to be climbing this 14,500 foot mountain for? And I sat down on a boulder, and these 2 people came walking past me, a guy and a girl, and they get about 10 foot past me, and then the woman turns around, she comes back to me, and she says to me, it's not a race. She says, as long as you keep moving, you'll get there. She says, as long as you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you'll get there. So just take your time. And that really changed my perspective on it. It's another lesson in little by little. Everything can be achieved little by little. We just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Soon enough, we're going to get to the mountaintop.
How would you like your life to be different 1 year from now than it is today? And if it isn't, who will you blame? Who will you blame? What will you put it down to? More importantly, what questions do you have to ask? What habits do you have to put into your life to make that new life a reality? Because it's not freak luck, and God doesn't have any favorites. The difference between the heroes, the leaders, the legends, the champions, the saints, and the rest of us, they just have better habits. You want your life to be different 1 year from now than it is today? Change your habits. Go home tonight, make a list of them. Maybe it is the 10 minutes a day. Maybe it's taking the Sundays off. Maybe it's asking yourself each morning when you're showering, whose day can I make today? I tell you what, you do those 3 things, you'll have some powerful changes in your life. You'll be a different person a year from now. You do those 3 things faithfully. You commit yourself to those 3 things with courage, with perseverance. You can't even imagine your life a year from now. But it's not freak luck and it's not chance. Some of you will and some of you won't. It's not because God has favorites. It's just because at different points in our lives, some of us, we decide to get a hold of ourselves. We decide to plant the habits in our lives that will bear the fruit we want our lives to bear. It's not freak luck, it's not chance, and God doesn't have any favorites. Our lives change when our habits change. It's been great to be with you here in these days. It's been great to share this series with you. And as we finish tonight, I'd like to leave you with one last story. It was almost 10 years ago to the day that I gave my first talk in Sydney, Australia, to just a handful of people. And I told a story that night that has remained always my favorite story to tell. I haven't told it in many years, but as we finish tonight, I'd like to leave you with this story because I believe that the story captures the essence of transformation in the human person and the essence of the transformation of humanity, the transformation that we both desire and the transformation that God desires to give to his people. Once upon a time, there was a businessman, a very, very successful businessman. He had an enormous company, thousands and thousands of employees. And for many years, everything was fine. Business was great, and he enjoyed great success and prosperity. But one day, for reasons nobody really knows, things began to slide a little. Business began to slip away from him to his other competitors. And little by little, his company seemed to be on a downward trend. After several years of this downward trend, it appeared that things had become so bad that his company would go bankrupt and that his competitors would completely take all of his market share away from him. And so the businessman, he decided to hold a meeting for all of his employees, to have a dinner so that he could have an opportunity to speak to them, to share with them his plan for how he could bring his company back to the top, how he could bring his company back to number one. Well, the Saturday morning before the dinner, he was sitting at home in his study preparing his speech. And in his speech, he wanted to show his employees how each one of them was critically important to the plan he wanted to implement, and how the role each of them played would be responsible for the renewed success of his great corporation. And as he was sitting at home in his study that Saturday morning, his wife had to go out shopping, and about 10 minutes after she was gone, there was a knock on the study door. And there appeared his young 7-year-old son and exclaimed, "Dad, I'm bored. I've got nothing to do." So the father half tried to amuse his child by playing a board game with him, while at the same time half tried to finish writing his speech. This went on for nearly 2 hours. And then the father realized that unless he could find some other way to amuse his child, he wasn't going to get his speech finished in time. So the father, he picked up a magazine and he flicked through the magazine until he came to a large, brightly colored map of the world. And he tore that page out and he ripped it into many, many pieces, and he threw the pieces all over the living room floor, and he said to his child, "Son, if you can put the map of the world back together, I'll give you $10. And with that, the child rushed to the task, eager to earn some extra pocket money. And the father returned to his study, believing that he had just bought himself 2, maybe 3 hours to finish writing his speech. Because the father also knew that his 7-year-old son had no idea what the map of the world looked like. But about 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the study door. And there appeared the boy, smiling, holding the completed puzzle. His father, in amazement, said to his child, "Son, how did you finish it so quickly?" The boy smiled larger than ever and said, "You know, Dad, I had no idea what the map of the world looked like. But I noticed that there was a picture of a man on the back. So I put a blank piece of paper down and I put the picture of the man together. Because I knew what the man looked like. And then I put another blank piece of paper on top and I held the two tight together. I flipped them over. I took the top piece of paper off, and there was the world, complete, in order, just as it should be." He said, "You know, Dad, I figured if I got the man right, the world would be right." It is the ageless message The problem is not out there. The change that is needed is not needed out there. The change that is needed within. Because you and I, we've bought this lie that we don't have enough power, or we don't have enough influence, or we can't change the world. We keep putting the problem and the power outside of ourselves. We keep placing the problem and the power outside of ourselves. We keep placing the problem and the solution outside of ourselves. And so nothing changes. But when you and I, when we begin to affect what we can affect, it is then that we will begin to have an effect. We have the power to be the difference that makes the difference in this world, in our place, in our time, and yet is the most unemployed of all human abilities. Is the most unemployed of all human abilities. You want to live a life of greatness? You want to live a life of greatness? Find that power, engage that power, employ that power every day, and you will live a life uncommon. Find that power, engage that power, employ that power every day, and you will live a life uncommon. Thank you. Good night.
So as we come to the end of our time together, there's a question I'd like you to ponder. You see, our culture is completely focused on questions like, what's in it for me? And what do I get out of it? And how quickly can I get it? But the question I'd like you to ponder is, what contribution will you make? You are here in this place, at this time, for a reason. And the question is, what contribution will you make? Because I know only one thing for certain, and that is, the only ones amongst us that will ever be happy are those amongst us who learn to serve. However small our service may be, those of us who will find happiness will find it because we learn to serve, because we find a way to make a contribution, and only then will we make the most important journey there is in life, the journey from success to significance. The significance comes only when we learn that we are here in this place at this time to make a contribution. What contribution will you make?